A few years ago, I was introduced to the game Dungeons and Dragons, and like so many of you can probably relate to, I found that I really enjoyed it. As a musician, my way of reacting to situations like that is to make music, and I started out by making little theme songs for our campaigns or little walkout songs for our characters, and I noticed that my friends seemed to really enjoy them. They advised me to break into a bigger project, to start writing music for these pre-existing adventures that are published that you can run a party through. And I responded by making an album of instrumental music that is heavily inspired by this, Phandelver and Below the Shattered Obelisk, which you might remember as the Lost Mines of Phandelver from the starter set of D&D. I feel like I learned a ton about composition through the process, and there are some lessons that I'd love to share with you. I mean no disrespect to the major D&D tabletop RPG music making studios, but the thing that I find interesting about a lot of that music is that it's a very high density most of the time. What ends up happening, I've found, is that you need to keep on riding the volume levels on whatever sort of, Bluetooth speaker that you're using to play music. The music is either too quiet to be enjoyed, or if it's loud enough for you to hear details, it's usually too overbearing. And I found myself comparing that to music that I love from video games that seems to be just the right amount of density to be able to be enjoyed but never get in the way. And so as inspiration for the music that I made for the album inspired by Lost Mines, I decided to go for a more Legend of Zelda, Stardew Valley, games like that approach. These really hooky kinds of songs that aren't going to get in the way of what you're doing, but are still going to stick in your head enough to be functional and help you remember themes and places and characters. In the Phandelver story, there's one main, really mysterious villain. And so with this kind of low density approach that I was favoring, I knew that every little element was going to count. And I decided to represent this villain with the Chinese instrument, the gucheng. It's a zither instrument. And I wanted this same little cascading melody to happen to represent this mysterious figure. And I noticed that when I was composing, that I needed to make room for that melody to happen throughout the adventure so you could get a sense of this character's actions weaving throughout the story. I noticed that to shine a sort of sonic spotlight on that melody, I could either drop instruments out or follow hits, but I needed to do things that emphasized that musical moment whenever it happened so that the players would have to kind of perk up and remember that little musical motif the same way that they would notice that character's actions throughout the story. The eventual boss fight against that mysterious villain is the climax of the entire adventure. And because I knew that going in, I knew that I needed to plan for that moment to be the biggest moment, the most intense moment. Since I was working in the box, what I ended up doing to make sure that that happened was to save the very highest velocities of the MIDI instruments that I had available and save them only for that track at the very end of the album. That meant working backwards. But what I found is that system allowed me to save some juice for that ending moment easier than it would have been if I had just decided to go bigger and bigger and bigger and hope for the best by the time I got to the end. Like the big bad guy and the guchung that represents him, I found that composing through the lens of characters and locations allowed me to make the choices that I was going to have to make anyway about instrumentation and harmony and melody with a lot more clarity and intuition. I used an accordion and a tuba to bring out the bumbling quality of goblins. I represented the party with the string quartet and especially the cello. But I never let this kind of system get in the way of making cool music. I don't think that orcs and ogres are represented by saxophones very well, but I still used them about 2/3 of the way through the adventure because I wanted to make a cool tune. Knowing when to lean on your system and when to branch out is a pivotal choice whenever you're writing music, and knowing when to do either can really make or break a process. I faced a real problem with this project in that I wanted it to have an ebb and flow the way you would with any album, but I also wanted the person in charge of music at whatever table to never have to touch the volume after they had set it for the first time. And that meant that this normal kind of change in volume that we call dynamics was kind of off the table in the typical way for me. So I needed to figure out a way to change energy without changing volume. And it just reminded me that there are a lot of different sources of energy, whether we're subdividing rhythms, or using timbre, or using harmony, or using silence. We have all kinds of tools at our disposal that are apart from just getting louder or quieter. And using all the tools that we have allows us to make the most nuanced music possible. The lessons that I've learned through this project have already expressed themselves in the other music that I make. I feel more decisive in my decision making. I feel more adventurous with harmony and melody, and from that perspective, this is already valuable. I've also learned a little bit about music distribution in that I've mistakenly connected this record with the music of a 90s CCM artist called Ian White. And I've talked to everyone I can think to talk to and still can't figure it out, so if you have help, leave it in the comments. It's also really endeared me to this adventure, and if you know this adventure, you know that the Lost Mines of Phandelver is now part 1 of Phandelver and Below, the Shattered Obelisk. And if you've made it this far in this video, then your reward is the knowledge that part 2, the much scarier, crazier part, comes out tomorrow, Friday, October 24th, 2025. I hope that you will take a listen to it, share it with your friends that play D&D. I'd love to talk shop with you about D&D or D&D music in the comments. You can find everything that I do on my website, and thank you so much for watching.